listen.
Never in my life associated the word boring with baseball.
We know what's up.
Me? Yeah. Famous? Yeah.
And I'm like giddy over there smiling like, we're about to win this shit.
Did everyone give you crap? Give me a good host story.
I'm not picking it up.
We both love the game.
We talk about it every day.
Can't get enough baseball.
Having some popcorn, you're fooling around your phone.
I'd have to wait in line for 3 hours.
Hang on, because it's about to be a wild ride.
All right, well, I'm sitting here with Rays pitching coach, Kyle Snyder. Welcome to the Eye Test Podcast underneath the Baseball Isn't Boring umbrella. I appreciate you being here.
Yeah, my pleasure. Happy to be here.
So, you're known as one of the better pitching coaches in all of baseball, and you guys have obviously been pitching well for a while. How difficult has it been this year when you guys had the injuries that you guys had, coming into the year?
I mean, injuries are certainly part of the game. That's why depth is important now, as it probably ever has been in the game. And I think it's important that we have those guys that are kind of the next guy up that can step up, fill the void and go out there and continue to compete. But they present their challenges, of course. But we do feel confident with the core group that we have, and just hoping that as we get a little bit more healthy as the season goes on, and some of the starters that we lost last year are able to come back, that it's going to be a big boost for us.
You guys are known as the pitch doctors, so to speak, and they come to you and all of a sudden, these guys who may have a 5 ERA suddenly have a 1 ERA. Guys that might have struggled in the past, say Tyler Glasnow with Pittsburgh, he comes to you guys, turns into a Cy Young candidate. What goes into you guys' method that sort of works, and how do you guys present that information to the players to make it digestible for them to have success?
I think the most important thing about the messaging is distilling down the information so that it is easier for the player to apply. Bringing context to things, illustrations can be very powerful, so that it's easier for them to understand some of the suggestions that you might be making. It could be a pitch distribution adjustment. It could be building out an arsenal differently. And now you're factoring in a lot of genetic traits in terms of how these players move and kind of what direction that might take you as well. But I'll say this, it's a very cohesive department. We all pull at the same rope. We have thoughts about how to optimize or best optimize the pitchers that are on our roster or coming through our system. And a lot of that goes into just the collaboration and the collaborative effect of understanding everybody being on that same page, and just making sure that we're doing our best. Strength and conditioning, looking at mobility, looking at strength, looking at areas that we can improve that can ultimately show up in how they move on the mound. When
you say illustration, what do you mean by this? Is it showing them certain guys on the mound, certain what they're doing on the mound? What sort of goes?
All types of illustrations, from modeling something by showing a player how one particular person moves that might move similar to them, or just showing them something that provides context to a message that you're suggesting a change for. If you bring something that's more powerful than just this is my opinion, then I think you do get the buy-in far more quickly. And then at the end of the day, the relationship, the trust that you develop with the player, and figuring out the best way to approach that particular player as you get to know them, how they're wired, what they respond best to. But generally speaking, I feel illustrations can be probably as powerful as anything in showing guys how to do something, as opposed to just trying to articulate what needs to change in their movement, is something that, generally speaking, actually works a lot more quickly than me just sitting there talking to them.
When the game seems like it's going from, generally speaking, it seemed like it's going from a north-south. You're seeing a lot more east-west now with pitchers. Is that because hitters have now adjusted to that level? What's gone into now the game going back to those type of zones within, I guess, the them commanding the ball in that way? What sort of goes into that?
Well, I think over the course of time, you've seen different adaptations. We went through the up fastball revolution. Prior to that, I was actually getting questions earlier this spring about the number of split fingers that are being thrown now compared to years past. The game, given that it's somewhat of a copycat game, you can see what works for particular organizations. We do our best to take certain things away and that we identify that are successful that we may not be actually leveraging ourselves. But I think you're going to see these adaptations continue to occur, right? It's hitters are making adjustments, and then we're having to react to some of those adjustments. But it really just comes down to space creation, right? Whether it's, you're an east to west guy, or if you're capable of actually attacking east to west and north to south. Certain guys are capable of doing that with slots that fall somewhere in between a low slot and a high slot. And but really just leveraging the modern initiatives, the ball tracking devices, and figuring out what a particular player is capable of, within their genetic traits, and really focusing on that rather than just saying now we're east to west and that's what where the success lies. I think you really have to keep it a little bit more individualized in the sense that certain guys are capable of creating space in different ways than others.
Last couple questions. I want to speak on sort of spin and velocity. There seems to be sort of this conversation going on. I know the Red Sox are spinning more than they have in years, right? I think they're spinning the most in the league. They're throwing a lot of breaking balls, and they're having a lot of success. You guys, I think Tyler Glasnow, if you correct me if I'm wrong, I remember he sort of described himself as a velocity slut or something like that. How do you balance the two? Like, what's sort of the approach? Like, what's your take on pitchers, the game itself just spinning the ball a lot more now?
Well, I think at least for, I'd say probably the last half a dozen years, it became a bit more fashionable to utilize your best pitch more often and more frequently. And as long as you can, control the strike zone before two strikes. And, I think certain organizations may have been a little bit, less inclined to do that as quickly as others, but we've been an organization that, we've certainly pressed on that and encouraged it, and at the willingness of the pitcher. Robert Stevenson was a guy last year for us that increased his slaughter usage considerably and had a really good 4.5 month run. But I think the concept of just using your best pitches more often isn't all that novel, but breaking balls are harder to hit than pitches that are just straight. And but having said that, you still got the Tyler Glasnows of the world that impart more of an all power, no art, concept to their approach. And listen, you still got to throw as many strikes as you can before two, and if you can do that with your breaking ball, then I think that's something that's it's gonna generate a lot of success, and you've certainly seen that with Boston so far this year, and the number of strikes they've thrown, and certainly increasing the usage of breaking balls.
And lastly, you just have to, do you think velocity is it as much of a thing, that a requirement for the game now as it was, say, like 5-10 years ago when everybody was like velo?
It's always going to be a two-part equation. Like location deltas are always going to matter, but velocity and the lack of time, like hitters by each passing day are running out of time. That is a huge benefit to pitchers, and there's different ways to achieve that, but velocity being probably the main one. Deception, extension, closing the gap or gaining ground on the hitter. It's just making hitting that much more difficult, because there's a point that they have to make a decision, wherever that arbitrary point is. They have to make a decision, and our job is to reduce that time, and velocity can certainly do that, but locations, deception, there's other layers to it as well. But I do think that we have to always remember that it's a two-part equation. You got to create good stuff, but you have to be able to put it to work, right? And locations are just as valuable now as they ever have been in the history of the game.
Kyle, thanks so much. I appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Thanks, man.